and making a meaningful impact. Our guest tonight is Sibabalwe Sesmani, who is founder and director of the Unorthodox Group, with one of their subsidiaries being Unorthodox Sports. Good evening, Siba, and welcome to Sport on Full View.
Good evening, Colleen. Good evening to everyone that's watching. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Let's start with who the Unorthodox Group is and how the recent subsidiary Unorthodox Sport came about.
It's such an interesting story in the sense that I think properly it started about 6 years ago. So 6 years ago in October, Unorthodox PR was born, of which that's a public relations company that deals mostly with media relations and anything external communications. So what happened is that I think during lockdown about May or June of this year, we signed a contract with Makazole Mapimpi. So originally our organization, our PR organization, only deals with corporates. But we thought, you know what, we had the inquiry, and who would say no to Makazole? Truly, he's such a legend. So we worked on his brand. But then with us then working on his brand, we saw so many gaps when it comes to sports in general, in the sense that we saw like a lot of athletes are not properly managed. And we just saw that a lot of them aren't even managed at all. So through working with Makazole, we then decided, let's put our heads together. I know the business of PR and the branding, and he knows sports, I mean, at the highest level, having won the World Cup. So we just put our heads together. We've got another business partner as well, and we just decided to form Unorthodox Sport. So primarily with Unorthodox Sport, what we do is that we manage and we maximize the brand of a professional athlete. So we link them up with endorsements. We create some sort of media attention around them. But that's very short term. What we do also is that we look at what they can retire to. So a sports star, they don't get injured. Maximum player's age is about 35, 37 if you look across the sporting codes, if they even make it that far, because younger and younger talent is replacing them. So then we start planning now while we can still maximize their brand as to what we can do in the future. So we not only look at their brand and media relations now, but we also look towards the future and we help them with their financial and investment planning. So we're not agents in a sense that will link you up to a club, but what we do is that at grassroots level, not only for pro athletes, we do provide as much exposure as we can so that an agent can pick you up much easier.
That is fantastic. But one thing that we do know that is a huge business challenge for a lot of stars in the creative space, whether it be musicians or professional athletes, is financial literacy. How are you contributing positively to this problem?
So we've got some consultants that work with us. I mean, the company's only 2 months old, but we managed to put in some really good structures. We do have consultants that are experts in the fields of financial literacy and financial planning. So we not only tell them what to do with their finances or where to invest, but we actually teach them so that when they do decide to go off on their own and make their own decisions, they can more or less tell if this is going to be good for me or not. So we educate the player, but we also put them towards the right direction to say, this is what you should be doing with your finances now, and maybe you should invest now in order to get some sort of return. But it's also very important to work with them to see where their passions lie as well. Because some people want to go into coaching, some people want to go back into sports. And, you know, you've got the Magazoles that have decided to go into business. So it also depends on the player themselves, what they want to do. And we make sure that we just put those measures in place.
I love that. And really, in essence, brand management is about the personality and the manager, of course. And when I think of the likes of David Beckham, you know, they are still a notable brand today with weight because of the advice that has been implemented in carrying forward that brand. What is the kind of advice that you then give to future young stars and sports personalities?
I mean, at a point where you can't maybe possibly get a manager at such a young age in your career, educate yourself. Look up what you just made a great example actually about David Beckham. He's got a whole book on how to brand yourself. So make sure that you're educating yourself and you're doing what you can. I mean, there's social media. There's all sorts of people giving away free advice. I mean, you can give us a call as well. We'll be glad to guide you as to which direction you should go or how we can assist to a certain level. But it's so important to look after your brand. And it's also important to build yourself up so much that you are just only focusing on what you have to do on the field and you're leaving the rest to us. So just look after your brand. Make sure your brand is clean, because also people want to work with people that are not controversial, and just be so intentional about everything that you decide to do or invest your time in, because that's also one of the many external factors that come into play when either a soccer player or also a rugby player is signed on by a club.
I love the fact that you say controversy is not such a good thing, you know, and sometimes, especially with social media, some people tend to think that if you are a little controversial, you're getting the retweets, the likes, etc., and it's increasing your profile, but not so much. But I want us to take a look now at life-changing moments. You know, it could be winning the World Cup like your client, Magazole Mapipi, or even signing your first professional contract. For a lot of these athletes, it's a dream come true, but what should they be remembering in that very moment?
Well, I'm going to speak from a business point of view, but scrutinize your contract as much as you can. Make sure that they've got your best interest in heart, and just make sure that for those however many years that you play, you're well taken care of. And what's going to determine if you're well taken care of or not is your contract. I mean, you've seen some ridiculous contracts, not just from sporting clubs, but also from endorsers, where they look after themselves and not necessarily the player. So scrutinizing a contract, making sure that it makes sense. But the most important thing, remembering that you are a brand. And as much as it's great that you are signing up with that club or with that necessary brand, but they also need to know that you are bringing in value, and you need to know that you've got value that you're always bringing to the table. So I think those two things are important for me. Make sure you scrutinize your contract, make sure it works for you, but then also remember that in as much as they are bringing value into your life, you are also bringing value into their life. It's always a dual relationship. It's never one-sided.
Siba, I actually want us to touch on a point that you made earlier on about education. And we do find that a lot of sporting personalities really find it difficult to build a life outside of their sporting code. So how does your company ensure that there is longevity even after the play on the field has come to an end?
So what's really important for us is to make sure that we've created strategies that are very personalized to the player. So, for instance, Makazole, I mean, I think you guys have seen his gender-based violence campaigns. Yeah. That's something he feels strongly about, because that's something that's taken away from his childhood. You know, even before we came into the picture, he needed to use his influence, which came through in the game that was played last year in Japan in 2019. So what we did is that we just structured it based on his passions. So with every single client that we get, we have to sit down with them. We have to have a conversation about everything and make sure that we know what they're interested in. So we start now building for the future, seeing which consultants that they can work with, seeing which industries they should potentially go into. But then we also advise us to say, this is maybe what you should also be looking at. And funny enough, when looking out for them after retirement, it also helps us structure which organizations they then attach themselves to when it comes to doing any sort of campaigns and doing any sorts of endorsements. So it's really a very highly personalized strategy, and it's up to the player themselves that they feel passionate about a certain point, but it's just that they don't know how to necessarily execute, and they don't have the time to execute, because at that point in time, they have to kick a ball, they have to pass a ball. So we just take care of the execution for them, and we just make sure that that is done.
All right. And when we talk about brand management, a lot of the times the focus is on the sport personality and the manager, but we forget that there's the element of family, which plays such a huge role. You know, when we think of Lewis Hamilton, his father guided him to his first world title, but then at some point he had to look to the likes of yourself to actually fill in that void. Now you would find that a family could either be an obstacle or an aid in that instance. How do you manage that dynamic?
So that's very interesting. You should say that we chat with our clients. We sit them down. We go as far as looking into their love lives and seeing if they've got, are they married? Are they in a relationship? Because those things are important. They need to understand that, you know, if they post our client in a certain manner or not in such a good light, this is what's going to happen. That's if it's their wife, or if it's their girlfriend. Also with their family, we try to also make them understand that you need to create a positive, conducive environment. Because you know what, if that player actually makes it and they've got a really big brand, it also filters down to their family, because really you are nothing without your family. So we do go into those deep conversations to find out, what is the structure like? Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend? Or do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a husband? How is your family structure? What kind of home do you come from? Is it a single mom? Is it both parents that are there? We do go into those those details.
Wow.
Because a lot of sport, it's not just physical, it's also psychological. So it's looking at all of those factors, and a person is holistic. So you need to look at the person holistically and not like just one element where is they kick a ball or they pass a ball. Every single individual has different compartments. So we have to touch on as many of those as we possibly can.
And maybe just to close it off, in terms of sport management, this is something that you would have to go to school for, or can anyone really just decide that I actually also want to start maybe my own unorthodox group, because you really are working with real talent, you know, people who are going to make a difference in the sporting fraternity. What kind of credentials should you be having?
I think on my side, it's a bit of a unique story because I'm actually an economist. I study economics and econometrics, but I've been in the business of public relations for 6 years, as I alluded earlier on in our chat. So I think what that experience then brought of PR and working with organizations, because what we do is that we view every organization and we break them down as a person. So for us, getting an individual that we work with is almost what we do with organizations, but individuals require a whole lot more time, whereas a company has a company culture, they know what they stand for. But for an individual, you have to almost work backwards to say, what is your culture? What do you stand for? And what are your pillars? So I think through the 6 years of experience that I've had in PR, that really helped a lot. But then also, I think just what I was alluding to before is that you always need to constantly educate yourself. So I've been looking at the David Beckham's, seeing how their brands have lasted so long. I think at some point you even forgot he was a soccer player because he's involved in so much and he's still very much relevant. So that's exactly what we want to do for our clients in whatever industries that they decide to go into after retirement. But then I think what also helped me is that I've got a business partner like Magazole, who's absolutely amazing when it comes to both of our personalities working. And I mean, just him as a player and his in-depth knowledge of the needs of players on and off the field. So we make a good team in that way. But I would highly recommend that if you are in a position to study, go and study brand management, touch on some sports as well. But if you aren't, you can also take short courses as and along the way, because I mean, you're always learning. There's always something new. 10 years ago, we didn't know that social media would be this powerful. But I would recommend learning. If that's not an option, go at it, do it, and learn on the go as and when you can.
Thank you so much, Siba, for making the time and sharing those insightful thoughts. We were joined on Sport on Full View by Sibabalwe Sesmani, who is the director and founder of Unorthodox Group, which recently started Unorthodox Sports. Just a quick update on the DStv Premiership matches, which are currently underway. It is goalless between both encounters. That is Bloemfontein